Good morning, one and all. We are so excited to be joining you today in this very early morning on Tuesday, January 17th, for a dynamic session on activating technology and innovation for gender equality. My name is Kendricks. I am from UN Women, and I couldn't be more excited than to have today's conversation with such an amazing group of committed gender equality actors. I'm delighted also to welcome you all to the HCL Tech Pavilion, where UN Women has the first ever gender equality hub here at Davos. We are thrilled about that. HCL Tech is one of UN Women's He for She champions, and we're thrilled to be partnering together with HCL Tech on the Gender Equality Hub. For those of you who don't know already, HCL Tech is a big technology company home to 222,000 people across 60 countries, really bringing together the best of technology, the best of people to supercharge transformation. HCL Tech is incredibly committed to ESG and has committed to achieving zero net by 2040. In addition, the HCL Foundation has invested over $120 million to improve the lives of all people across India. So let's jump into today's conversation. As I mentioned, it is on activating technology and innovation for gender equality. And just a few months ago at the UN General Assembly, our executive director, Dr. Seema Sani Bahus, had a very important thing to say. And it was the following. She said, the digital divide has become the new face of gender inequality. The digital divide has become the new face of gender inequality. And indeed, what we see, certainly, is that digital technologies are rapidly transforming society, allowing for unprecedented growth, unprecedented opportunities for women and girls around the world. We're seeing the improvement of social, economic, and political benefits in new ways and at vast paces. But we're also seeing digital technology giving rise to new challenges that actually might perpetuate and reinforce existing inequalities inequalities. This year is a pretty important year. It's a year that at that event at the UN General Assembly was announced as a year of action on innovation and technology for gender equality. And that's because there's some important things happening this year. Number one, at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, for the first time ever, will focus on gender equality, innovation, and technology. This would enable the world's governments to look at technology and innovation and to see how the normative frameworks in the world can be advanced to support innovation and technology that works for everybody. Furthermore, the United Nations, under the leadership of the Secretary General, is advancing something called a Global Digital Compact. A Global Digital Compact which is seeking to connect all people to the internet, to do so in a way that embeds human rights, and to ensure that regulatory frameworks are supporting those principles. We're going to hear a little bit more about the CSW today from some of our speakers. But all of this to say that advancing this work really requires new dialogues between the private and the public sector, dialogues that bring civil society into the forefront, dialogues that are multi-stakeholder in orientation. And one of the frames for those dialogues certainly is the Generation Equality Forum, an unprecedented initiative by UN Women to bring together partners in a series of action coalitions, one of those being on innovation and technology for gender equality. And we've got two of our leaders here from that action coalition who will share a little bit more about that. The Action Coalition is bringing together ideas, energy, really co-creating a new blueprint that's setting out a pathway of action for the world to advance gender equality for innovation and technology. So with these few words, let's dive into today's conversation with this group of panelists. We're going to share their perspectives, their ideas, their energy on how to design a more equal and tech-driven future. So I'm going to start first with you, Kate. Kate is the corporate vice president for Microsoft Philanthropies. And Kate, I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts around some of these seismic shifts that we're seeing around the world that are shaping the 21st century. And certainly Microsoft is standing at the center of one of those companies that has shaped technological advancement. We know that. We've all watched that growth for so many years. And certainly reshaping innovation ecosystems involves bringing together actors, combining the expertise of companies like Microsoft together with governments, together with civil society, to really promote that enabling environment that's going to bring, I think, adequate safeguards, but also that vision of gender equality ahead. So as one of the leaders of this Action Coalition, how do you see your role in promoting multi-stakeholder approaches and initiatives that will help amplify impact, improve digital inclusion, diversity in the workforce, and greater accountability in the deployment of technologies? A big question. Over to you, Kate.
A big question, and thank you, Sarah, and thanks to UN Women and HCL. It's really terrific just to have a spotlight on these issues here in Davos this year. Look, as a technology company, I mean, we certainly see the huge advantages of technology, and we also see the challenges that technology brings as well. And on the one hand, technology can really be an equalizer if everybody can access it and everybody can use it. But as you said, the digital divide might be the new face of inequality, and so it's a really important issue. And we saw during COVID just rapid digitization. It was on steroids. In a couple of years, in a couple of months, I think we saw years of digitization, and it changed pretty much every aspect of our lives. It changed the way that we worked. It changed the way that we were educated. Yes. It changed the way that we connected. Women and girls, as we know, were perhaps impacted in the greatest way. So one of the things that we really focus on a lot is making sure that everybody gets access to digital skills, because innovation and technology is fantastic, but if you don't have the digital skills to use it, then that's a problem. And so in Philanthropies, we anchor a lot of our work on digital skills, focused on underserved people and communities, and often that is women. We're really proud to be a founding member of the Global Equality Forum. I think one of the advantages of the forum is that it helps us all come to the table and think about, what are the strengths and the unique strengths that we can bring to help address this issue. So for us, some of our commitments included, as an example, our airband team was really focused on providing internet access to women and girls. We partnered with USAID and have sort of focused initiatives in a number of countries, because if people can't access the internet, then they can't get digital skills. If they can't have digital skills, they don't know how to leverage the internet to for education and for livelihood opportunities as well. And it's also, I think, really important to have very tailored initiatives. I think for measurement is very important. And so, we've always had soft targets with the work that we do around women, but more and more we're designing, our programs to be very focused on women and girls, and think holistically about, issues that might prevent women and girls getting access to technology and then being able to use it.
Great, thank you so much. The focus that you're bringing in terms of that digital skills access is so critical. And I think that, especially for underserved populations, what we hear from many, many women around the world is that having a smartphone is not enough. That actually having the skills and the abilities, the capabilities to utilize a phone or the internet is what actually is the ingredient to transformation. So thank you for the leadership that Microsoft is bringing to that. I'd love to direct my next question to Caitlin. Caitlin Kraft-Buchman is the CEO and founder of Women at the Table. And Caitlin, Women at the Table has also been one of the leaders of the Action Coalition for Technology and Innovation. We know, as I've already highlighted today that digital tech is rapidly transforming society. We've already heard that one of these ways is through greater access to digital tech skills. We also know that there are challenges associated when we look at this through women's eyes. CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, will be, I think, a really profound opportunity for the world's governments, but also civil society, the private sector, to dialogue on these issues. What is that blueprint that the Action Coalition on Tech and Innovation, what has it identified as those core key actions? How can you bring those forward to these discussions at the global arena in this year's Commission on the Status?
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
And just, we're really excited that UN Women has the first time a pop-up at Davos, and very, very grateful to HCL for hosting UN Women and this Action Coalition for gender. It is for tech and innovation for gender equality. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
We're not only excited, we've been leaders, we've helped make the blueprint with our partners, Microsoft, but also Global Fund for Women, UNICEF, ITU, International Telecommunication Union, Social Builder, Digital Grassroots. It's been a big coalition. Member states, Finland, Chile, Rwanda, Tunisia. Really all together, we worked over a year on this blueprint that has 4 pillars. There's access, ecosystem, innovation, and online gender-based violence. So it's AEIOU. I just really figured out this morning, tied to very early on how that works. So what does access mean? It's access to the internet, but it's also access to what? What kind of services are you going to get? And what we've also understood, because I'm also the co-chair for CSW of the expert group, from the expert papers and the extraordinary work that's been done by scholars around the world, that it's not only access to the internet, but it's access to the devices and it's access to the data. And we also see that during COVID, what happened is a lot of people sort of lowered the barriers, but it's sort of like that. It only helped really middle-class people. It was very, very useful, but it did not help the poorest of the poor in terms of what they really, really needed in terms of sort of upping everything and helping us rebound as a good economy. So there's access. There's E for ecosystem. So what does that mean? Often we talk about digital coding, school skills for girls. We tried to look at this again with this expert group as a much larger kind of ecosystem, looking at computational thinking from pre-K all the way to universities, because the way that data science is being taught in universities is also very exclusionary. So it's not really that sweet spot of girls who we'd like to learn to code, but really for everybody to start thinking about algorithms and in low resource environments so that you could teach, because this is just a way of thinking. It's just logic. You can do it with a stick in the sand. So we'd love to sort of be expanding with universities, different ways for people to be thinking about these equations that are just algorithms in a way that's knowledgeable. Then innovation. That means changing a lot of the structures that we have. So procurement could be where you're having women-led companies, but also you could probably jumpstart a whole new economic system if you privileged, in a way, women-led companies that were doing AI or were doing tech things, and we don't really have that across the board. So there's a lot of different ways we can do innovation. We, of course, in our work, talk about the data sets that are the fundamental driver of machine learning and how they've been very exclusionary. They've sort of left out not only women, but also people of color, sort of anybody, but a very small global subset on who the data has been based. And we'd love to be working with OpenAI and with Microsoft just to try and figure out how do we rebalance those data sets before we sort of embed them forever into our world going forward. And the last pillar is online gender-based violence, which of course is a scourge. It comes from the analog world, clearly, where it is a problem, as we know that 1 out of every 3 women in the world has had a tremendously traumatic experience with gender-based violence. But what we also see is that the tech is finding ways to sort of accelerate this. So there's a velocity to it and a horribleness to it, even though it's not physically happening to people. It's just it is very, very scarring. And that's something that we really need to get our brains around. So that's our action coalition.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And I think on that last piece on tech-enabled gender-based balance, this certainly is an area that all of us care about. And an area where we're seeing women in public life experiencing tech-facilitated violence in new and different ways, but where we also need a lens that includes age. And so that adolescent girl, in particular, who's coming online, who's engaging with social media, how is she across the world becoming vulnerable? And what are those both regulatory frameworks, but also the mechanisms that can provide the protection and support that she needs? And seeing digital technology through the eyes of that adolescent girl, I think is absolutely critical. I think a lot of what you've spoken about is around bringing a human rights-based approach to tech and innovation, and ensuring that a rights-based approach is part of our design of tech and innovation, which is absolutely paramount if we're going to look at the world through that lens of equality. So next, I would love, and I'm trying not to turn my back to you, I'd love to turn to you, Jill. Jill is the Chief Marketing Officer here at HCL Tech, and we are so grateful for the partnership and the hosting of this Gender Hub at Davos. Of course, we know, Jill, that the diverse role of companies like HCL Tech in the private sector as employers, as investors, as researchers, as designers, has such a significant role to play, offers significant opportunities to really move the needle on gender equality. So our question for you is, what are some examples of good practice, of positive practice on how HCL Tech is working with your clients to ensure products respond to the needs of women and girls, but also to track and address the gendered risks of emerging technologies? Over to you, Jill.
Thank you for the complimentary remarks. Appreciate it, Sarah, and we're really happy to have you and women here. I echo a lot of what Kate said earlier, but I think accessibility is a huge topic for us, but if you take it all the way back to recruiting and hiring, that is an area that we are extremely focused on at HCL Tech. We have a engineering and R&D services group that works with high-tech companies and also asset-intensive industries, but for purposes of this conversation, our team that focuses on high-tech employs thousands of software engineers. So they are in the trenches every day with leading companies that we've all heard of. And it needs to start from the top. We need to have more women in those software engineering roles. And there's so much happening today around promoting STEM for young women. In fact, we're partnering with a UN Foundation organization, Girl Up. I don't know if you're familiar with Girl Up, but a few of our senior leaders are seated on a few of those programs. And I was just looking back at the December Girl Up event where high schoolers from all over the world presented big ideas and big topics and big innovations, and just getting the next generation excited about choosing the area of engineering, digital transformation, digital consulting as career paths is critically important. And we are also doing quite a bit to appeal to high schoolers, actually bypassing university and recruiting people right out of high school and training them in-house through apprenticeship programs. And as they complete those programs, after a year, we're offering to pay for a 4-year college degree. So we're focused on both gender diversity and socioeconomic diversity, going into communities where there are high schoolers who may not be able to afford college. So I think it's so important to look across both gender and socioeconomic as well as racial diversity as we're hiring our next generation of engineers and techies. We call our people HCL techies. As far as, I actually spent some time talking to the leaders of our engineering and R&D practice, and our clients are demanding a couple of things. So ethical and responsible AI is critically important for any design and development, but also having supplier diversity across all of the partners that we're working with is something that the Microsofts of the world are demanding now. So this topic, we are not members of the coalition, but I think this is an increasingly important topic for us, even though we don't do as much of our own product design and development. But as our clients are demanding this, I'm seeing our organization become much more fluent on the topic. But I would like to see us just get a little bit more involved in some of the external initiatives like the one that UN Women is running.
And this is an open invitation to do so. So
Yeah,
I think it will only go from
Yeah.
strength to strength.
Yeah.
As we all join hands and leverage kind of these platforms like Generation Equality in order to take what you're already doing and ensure that we're amplifying it across
Yeah.
stages and connecting partners together.
Yeah, well, and I think the private-public partnership, plus, as I was prepping for this panel, I noticed Gartner is doing, they're putting out briefs on this exact topic and guidebooks on what companies should do. So I think there is so much interest in doing better,
Yeah.
and it's coming from all sides. So I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. And I think there's also just this eagerness, this open mindset for
Yeah.
us to learn from each other.
Exactly.
It's really exciting to hear about the way in which you're pulling young people into a workforce
Yeah.
and bringing that diversity forward.
Yeah, and
It's
trying to
encouraging
set,
that
and,
journey.
and I think setting targets is also important. We're aspiring for a 50-50 gender split in all of our new hires who are coming through these programs.
Amazing.
So again, you have to set those purposeful targets and measure yourselves and hold yourselves accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I would like to turn to yourself now, Åsa. Åsa Tamsons from Ericsson, you, and I hope I get your title right, Senior Vice President and Head of Business Area Technologies and New Businesses. Yes,
Correct.
I read it. Åsa, there are many demand-side barriers that are causing gender gaps in mobile internet use, in device use. I think some of these we've raised already today. Also, just in service consumption, where we see those demand-side barriers playing a unique role. Companies and certainly service providers have a crucial role to play in analyzing data trends and coming up with solutions to really pinpoint what do we do about those gaps?
Right.
How do we address those gaps? And how do we understand them from that demand side perspective? So what are some examples that you can bring that Ericsson is driving forward in terms of good practice on how to really unlock this, how to unlock the barriers that women and girls are uniquely facing in terms of equal access to both devices, but also connectivity? Over to you, Åsa.
Thank you, Sarah, and again, thanks HCL for hosting us here today. And I think it's brilliant that we have this gender equality lounge and that you're hosting here today. I think a lot of the reasons why this is important already been raised, right? We need access to connectivity, access to devices, because that's the foundation. If you don't have that, you're not included. And I think it's very clear if you look at just a simple thing like the job market in Europe, 90% of the jobs require basic digital skills. So if you don't even have access to connectivity, don't have access to devices, you don't even have the chance to build those fairly basic digital skills. So I think when you look at this challenge overall, yes, it's access to devices, it's access to connectivity, but it's also the skills. And I think it's been raised by a few already. And I think there are a couple of reasons, right? It's affordability of devices. It can be even, is there mobile coverage? Is there services, right? Income levels, education levels. So you understand also why this is important, right? So it has kind of it can be a positive ripple effect or a negative one. And I think this is kind of the root cause. We have committed at Ericsson, we want to really help to bridge that gap. There are a couple of reasons. I mean, one is just for the sheer interest of driving more inclusiveness, right? Drive more diversity and inclusion. But it's also a sheer economic one. If we really want to continue have a prosperous world and continue to drive innovation at large, we need to include everyone. And I think it's a necessity. And I think those that will not prioritize that, if that's companies, nations, will just not be as competitive over time. So I think it really goes together, this socioeconomic and the gender equality and inclusion. We partner around a program which we've done for quite some time now called Connect to Learn, which is trying to tackle this really basic thing. How do you get affordable devices and access to connectivity at schools? And we're prioritizing young people, not only girls, boys and girls, but we have an overrepresentation of girls not included, and hence don't have that access in schools or in sometimes rural areas. To date, we have connected 300,000 children in partnership with service providers, NGOs, like the United Nations, and public-private partnerships. And we realize this is a good investment, regardless if this is parts of rural North America or if it's about in sub-Saharan Africa. It pays off. Every investment in this area from public and private side pays off. But what we always also done is we realized that's one foundational step, but we also need to bring out the skills. I think here there's so many actors that can bring that. I'm very impressed by all the work that Microsoft is doing in this field. And we started just on the Ericsson side, we started one initiative, just as an example, called Technovation, where we actually have our employees mentoring a team of up to 5. So it can be 5 children or youth who are either women, non-binary, non-conformative, or trans, and who identify themselves with that and partner up in teams of 5 and identify a problem in their community that they want to be part of solving. And then we have part of our employees then mentoring, helping them to code, develop an app, develop AI that can help solve that problem. And in that way, you move from having access to a device to actually help solving a problem that is meaningful for them and contribute to the development of the society. So I think just 2 examples of concrete programs, initiatives, and I think the latter, what is really exciting with that one is they also then get a mentor. So they also get a mentor with someone who's already a professional at a tech company, and they learn through experimental education. So it's, I think there's a lot to do, and I think there's a lot that we all can do to help bridge this divide.
Thank you so much. And Åsa, I particularly appreciate you raising an example that brings a perspective that expands our understanding of what inclusion means. And ensuring that there's intentionality around an intersectional lens. In being intentional about reaching young people who are identifying as LGBTQI, and ensuring that that you're connecting not just to the building of those digital skills, but also the identification of a challenge they're facing in their own community. It's really inspiring, and I think what goes through my head is how do we drive that at scale? How do we ensure that this kind of goes from something that is in community by community, but actually has a ripple effect across the world? And we know for some young people that the challenges, Åsa, that you pointed out around it could be education, it could be just digital connectivity, but it can also be about power. We know that some of the women in their households and the youngest women in their households may have access to a phone, but not necessarily the power to make decisions over that handset. May not be able to actually use it in a way that best serves her vision of her own future. And that's particularly challenging. Caitlin, I can tell you want to jump in.
No, I just want to say that we have a paper that's coming out about gig workers in Latin America, and of all these gig workers who were, and we sort of filtered for women, their families thought that their work, where they were getting gainful employment and they were supplementing the income, thought that they were just hanging out on their phones and hanging out on the computers, and they still had more care work to do. It was not this idea. So they had access, they were borrowing a phone, they were adding to the family's income, but nobody was sort of paying attention to it. And that is part of the problem. We see in household surveys there are smartphones, but women don't have the access or the ability to use, and the data is too expensive. So that just wanted to.
Yeah. And in an increasing polarized world geopolitically, where we see new social movements rising up with women at the forefront, I'm thinking of Afghanistan, of Iran, of places around the world where that access to a phone and the ability to be able to connect to others across movements becomes such a critical and pivotal source of power and of empowerment. So thank you for all that you all are doing to highlight digital skills, accessibility, and to address in particular some of those demand side barriers. I did want to also just acknowledge that we've been talking about diversity and inclusion in multiple different ways, and yet I note that a lot of us look very similar. And I wanted to call it out because it's better to actually name that and to acknowledge how we bring Davos voices here to Davos that actually represent the full world of women and girls and of non-binary, non-conforming peoples. So, that's perhaps, I think, a challenge for all of us as we move forward. But that maybe brings me to my final question, a bit of a lightning round question. Please, in the interest of time, we'll keep our answers quite short. But just thinking about here at Davos, thinking about this week in Davos, what do you feel could be the most transformative commitments that can be made by entities, by partners across the board here at Davos this week to ensure that we build an open, a safe, and an equal future for generations to come? Would love to hear your ideas. I'm going to just randomly turn to you all, and I think we'll start with yourself.
I think, well, firstly, commitments that you can measure, I think is important. We touched on that earlier, but I think, multi-stakeholder commitments, I think, are essential. I mean, these issues are huge. We can't tackle these issues alone. I think that's one of the huge benefits of the Equality Forum. It's helping us come together, and as I said earlier, really play to our strengths. For us, as a technology company, we can, continue to think about the innovative ways that we can use technology to help address some of the issues. We talked a little earlier about access to mobile phones, and I think about we have a partnership with UNICEF with Learning Passport. It's leveraging mobiles, which often people have access to, but in online, offline, the sort of works in online, offline. We can continue to think about innovative ways that we can use technology, but we need to continue to work really closely with nonprofits who are really connected, very close to community on the ground. We need to continue to work with governments because, to your point earlier about scale, that's often one of the only ways that we can scale solutions. Thinking about policy recommendations as well. So I would say that we need to think about commitments that can be measured and also more multi-stakeholder collaborations.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to just turn to yourself, Jill.
Sure. Yeah. You said a few of the things I was thinking about. Just the criticality of public-private partnership.
Okay.
I was having a conversation with Anita from UN Women yesterday, and she was proclaiming that this is the first time, our partnership together on the promenade that someone has invited UN Women or any UN delegation into their pavilion. She's like, if we could just have, a sprinkling of other corporations, allow our team some space to actively have these critical dialogues, that would be wonderful. I will also comment on the lack of diversity of this panel. You know what? There are countless panels happening all around this promenade and in the Congress Center that are primarily male.
Yes.
And we need more of this,
Yes.
and we need more diversity amongst our gender, but we need more women at this event. There is an overpopulation of men just walking the streets here that are representing their corporations. So I would like to see it not be so hard for some of the groups that are looking to have more diverse panels to find women to even participate in them. So it takes us all working together and talking openly about this to drive change. And so again, I appreciate you hosting this conversation and all that I'm learning as I pop over to your pavilion this week.
Thank you so much, Jill. Over to you, Osa. You're up next.
So now I got a bit inspired. Just want to call out while we're at it. There's an amazing initiative that's been going on since I joined Davos 4 or 5 years ago for the first time, called 100 Women in Davos.
Ooh, what's that?
It's a very self-organized group that just giving, tips, advice for anyone who wants to have, sharing information, good places to go to while being here, but also say, we're here.
Yeah.
Include us, right?
Yes.
And there's amazing women who've been leading this initiative. So anyone having a problem finding a woman on the panel, search for 100 Women in Davos, you'll find them. And there will be more than 100 now. But I just echo the thing on partnership was actually the most important point I wanted to raise, and measurable targets. But while we're at it, just to pile on to that, I think if you look at the research, if you really want to drive one initiative that can have such ripple effect, if you can do something from private to public side in partnership that improves the access to technology for kids, youth who don't have it, and then you will actually address most of the girls who are not included, right? And in education, there will be so many positive ripple effects in so many dimensions coming from that. And anyone who is, concerned about return on investments, we know that will give favorable returns.
Great. Thank you so much, Osa. Caitlin, you've got the last word on this
Yeah,
question.
I agree with everything everybody said. Power, partnerships, participation. So participation, more intersectional people, we need to get them here. We actually, we have built with a whole consortium of people an app that measures not only representation, but participation and influence of women or youth or any group that you are gathering demographics on in assemblies, and that's something that we could work on. Participation, the partnerships. I think that you want to, I have to, it's very early in the morning, so I'm kind of do everything in my head. But for partnerships, I would love everybody also to remember their civil society. That also really needs to be an important player, and you need to bring in civil society as much as possible, but we can drive change, but we also need to be let into the rooms. And then I would say also in terms of changing power, partnerships, and participation. So I think that there you go, but changing the power dynamic a little bit. I would want to just add one thing, is that technology is really too important to be left just to technologists at this point. This is something that's become part of all of our daily life. So social scientists, anthropologists, activists, we need everybody really in the room coming with their solutions. That begins with this untapped resource of women and girls who have been left out of the system, but we really need everybody and their solutions in. So that's
Love that. Absolutely. I love that as well. And I think actually you did a great job of just summarizing some of the main points that have come through the panel. Not just in terms of multi-stakeholder partnerships, but also in terms of that criticality of access and participation that has rippled through, I think, the conversation today. Women's voices, I think, Jill, that you've highlighted, and the profile on women's voices as being paramount to participation. Your last point, Caitlin, that this matters it matters so much that it needs to go beyond technologists. Yeah. And I think that's what bringing a human-centric view and a human rights and human-centric view to technology and innovation for gender equality, why that matters so much. Our Secretary General of the United Nations, in a report that came out just last year called Our Common Agenda, talked about digital technology as being at an inflection point. And he said, we are at an absolute inflection point in history, right here. And now is the time to break that cycle of inequality and really join forces across partners in order to build what can only be an open, a safe, and a more equal digital future for generations to come. So I've been just super appreciative of the ideas that you all have brought to bear, the deep expertise and experience that your companies are bringing forward to the table. You know, this agenda could not be more timely than today, than now. It could not be more needed. I think as we head into this big moment of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, focusing for the first time on just this agenda, bringing the entire world's governments around the table to agree on a new normative framework on innovation and technology for gender equality. We're doing so by ensuring that we're bridging those conversations with the private sector, with companies, with civil society, with young people at the forefront of the conversation. So it's very clear that we need to be working together. I hope that today's collaboration, today's conversation has been an inspiration for all of you who have tuned in. There are many more key moments that we will have here at Davos this week at the Gender Equality Hub hosted by HCL Tech. We hope that if you're in Davos, come by the Gender Equality Hub. This is meant to be a place for open, dynamic conversation where we can look at the issues of the world and look at them through that lens, that intentional lens of gender equality. We hope that today's collaboration brought forward, I think, new ideas and new thinking on innovation and technology, where not just the people who are affected by innovation and technology, but we're all of us. We're all companies, we're all governments, we're all civil society, where all people are coming together to really spark a more equal and a more diverse digital transformation around the world. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to this amazing panel. And we're wishing you all the very best for a week in Davos as we drive forward to a more gender equal future together. Thank you so much.